Hi there, folks. Welcome to the New Space Finance's webinar series, where we explore finance, entrepreneurship, innovation, and ecosystems throughout the space sector and, frankly, beyond, because space is influencing everything. Yesterday, the very illustrious Robert Katz joined us on our webinar series, and I made a mistake and did not properly record the intro. So I wanted to record that now, just so that people understood who Robert is, and why his comments in the video you'll see the rest of the way are so interesting. For nearly 40 years, Robert had stood at the forefront of innovation and strategy within the national security and space communities. He's quietly influenced and deeply impacted a variety of work, both in prime contracting, working directly with NASA, the Air Force, what is now the Space Force, throughout the government, but also in commercial arenas as well. From his early days as a scientist and engineer, Robert designed and deployed game-changing technologies, some of which that have become ubiquitous today. He was there at the beginning of global email systems with GPS, and other revolutionary remote sensing technologies. His contributions were pivotal in the early days of New Space and even before New Space in many ways. More recently, he has become focused on building ecosystems and helping us as a nation and as a world really take advantage of what the new space economy and burgeoning space economy evolve. He's not just a strategist, but he is a creator of ecosystems. His insights into how they create, can flourish, and fundamentally transform industries and society make him uniquely positioned to discuss what we're going to jump into, the future of space innovation. So thank you, Robert. Jumping back into it, um, right, we are at a time where there's been this realization that to do big things, it takes an ecosystem. The idea of the singular scientist in a lab, in a basement, the eureka moment, that's all gone. We're in an era of big science, big technology, and ideally big impact on humans, on civilization, on communities, on people to make lives better, to protect people and planet. And let's be real, you've got to make a profit while you do it. That's where the capital and venture and all that comes in. So I'd love to, given that you've been doing this for a while and have done it successfully, but now are now applying those lessons learned in gaps that you see. Can you give us a framework on how people can think about this? Because we've got a lot of people from developing countries on this webinar, and people from areas where even if they're sophisticated economies and things, they're not leading space nations yet. Maybe they want to be. How can they start thinking about this?
Wow, that is not a new chapter in your book. That is a whole series of books that you're going to be soon having out. There's a lot there. So I think um part of it is to realize that, first of all, as we said, everybody needs to be working together collaboratively. And you said that it's now part of building ecosystems. And science really always was. I mean, everything we did actually was always a community.
Yeah.
Back as we started, as the way we were designed to live and breathe and work was part of a community. Science, in the old days, there was no difference between a philosopher or an astronomer or a physicist, or even a musician or an artist. Like you could be the same thing. And then as we allegedly progressed, people became over specializing and really kind of car diving deep. And that was, we kind of praised that. Like if you could be a super specialist in one little thing. And now we're realizing that that was probably a mistake, that we lost the
Mm.
forest for the trees. Just like in the human body, we say, oh, we have the system and that system and that system. Well, actually, we don't have any body has no systems. It's all one, is all holistic. And we have to look at the problem similarly, holistically. And that's why it's so important to have all members of the community together so we can look at all facets of the problem together, because we only look at a problem through the lens of solutions that we know. So like you say, if you're a hammer, all the problems are a nail.
Nail, right?
But we need to look at the problems holistically from a problem standpoint. And that's the problem, if you will, with the way we go about all of our entrepreneurial and innovation initiatives, really, in the US mostly, is that they're, oh, you have an idea. Oh, it's a great idea. Think of your idea, follow your dreams. Well, that's garbage. No one cares about your stupid idea or your stupid dreams. They care about solving problems. And then you complain and whine that, oh, there's no product market fit. Well, because you were chasing your idea, not the problem. So you really need to be taking the problem and then from that taking a solution and backing into that rather than the other way around. Now, which is the way most of Silicon Valley operates. And of course, if you throw enough money at something, you're eventually going to get a few that stick. Of course, we'll have to take credit that the few that did stick out of Silicon Valley weren't really innovative technologies at all. Uber and DoorDash and all of those are space technologies. They're space enabled companies. They're space companies
Yeah.
that really came from just thinking outside the box, not even new technology. So bringing the community together so that we have the multidisciplinary, multi-domain, multi-location, uh, multifaceted approach to problem solving. That's the only way we're going to solve the big problems. And actually, by the way, the big problems are really the only ones we should be working on because the smaller ones aren't really going to kill us, aren't going to get us. They're really not. They're really in the long term not worth it. We really need to spend more time focusing on the big problems, which is why we're playing catch up in space. Because I mean, this is not nothing's new. We knew from the beginning of my career all of the challenges that we had and we were going to have. They were all foreseeable, but it was seemingly more urgent problems that were more near short term, but they actually weren't nearly as important as being able to secure our space. Because without securing our space, all of the other technologies that we enjoy, whether they're in transportation or in logistics or in communications or in finance, they're all supported by a strong space infrastructure. And that is what we really should be should have been focusing on. I'm so glad that we're now redirecting that energy, as you point out, and you've done so much to be at the helm of that, to be focusing on the real, as I say, missions that matter.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's funny, I was speaking to a reporter yesterday about some of the NASA projects and the why do the big projects? Why not be more tactical, right? And it's fascinating because um, when you do the big things, you pull along all the little things. It's kind of like I know it's going to be funny, but to go back to the exercise analogy, and I know in your background, you have some significant things you've done. Um, when you look at things like CrossFit and other types of fitness, and the way that athletes and military train versus uh, other types of training that is often done it's all about doing the biggest thing you can do because that activates all the micro muscles, it strengthens all the tendons, all the connective tissue, literally. The literal connective tissue gets strengthened by doing these big things because they're drawn along and it forces all of that to activate. Um, Now with Win and some of your other initiatives, I know you've seen how this is um, uh, effective. So I would love to see if there are examples that you say, look, this is we did this, and therefore it pulled this along. I'm sure, I'd love to have you share some of those examples of success.
Yeah. Well, I think many of these come from the unseen consequences of what you do. And when you're in it, when you're making a sausage, you don't realize it's even edible. Like you don't realize it's a sausage. Um, and we always apply our current thinking and we never give ourselves credit for the mindset changes that are going to happen. So for instance, when I was trying to convince people that mobile communications was the big deal, like satellite communication. We need satellite communications. This was before cellular. Like there was no even concept of cellular communications. Not that I'm that old. I went into a time warp to go backwards, just so you know. Um, and people say, well, why would I need a phone? I can't understand why I need the phone because then, well, I have an answering machine. Like the answering machine is going to take the message. So I don't need to carry a phone with me. Why should I be bothered? They had no concept of the way the world would be changed and the way it would unleash you and unleash you for in terms of where you could be and what you could do. And you didn't have to follow your kids around every second because you could find them as soon as you needed to, and you could be flexible with your planning and all of the things you unleash, and you could have the good news is you could work from anywhere in the world you wanted, and the bad news is you could work from anywhere in the world that you wanted.
Exactly.
So and of course there was always the, oh, well, what are we going to do with all of our leisure time? So we apply our current mindset to, and it tends to cloud and put binders and guardrails on our innovative thinking. This is why, where just a quiz for everybody online, and they can put it in the chat. Like, where do the best innovation ideas come from? Everybody could share that. And Z, in 2 seconds, you could take a guess, or you could pick the best one that you see.
Yeah,
Where
yeah.
do
No,
all the
let's
best
have people.
innovative ideas come from?
Okay, the first one's a pretty good one in the shower.
Okay.
All right, but let's okay, universities, right? That's where
But
we expect
universities,
to
they
see
tend to
that.
all go in there. They're all that's sort of following the crowd because it's engineered that everybody think the same at the university.
It's highly normative. Other folks, please chime in. Where do you think?
I'll
Does it
give you
come
a
from
timer.
national
So
labs? Does it come from?
I I use the methodology to come up with something absurd. Okay. So that's close. Absurd. But three, two, one. Somebody's close. Science fiction, Hollywood. The artists are the best innovators. So if you think about, there's a reason for that. It's not just because they may be smart or it's cool. I mean, but if you think about all the technologies that we may be thinking about in the lab versus we think about on the screen, which of those normally come true? More often come true. We have Bluetooth devices, we have communicators, we have even all of the, and soon transporters, hopefully. So because they have the creativity to be not bound by the laws of science. They're unbound. They're unbound to think freely and to truly think without the kind of judgment that you have from our typical science communities that we all are in. So we can replicate that science fiction, or what I call from science fiction to science faction. We can replicate that by building these ecosystems and building these communities where we have diverse people from every country, every discipline, every community, every type of background at the table. And we create those similar type of environments that you have in science fiction where you're unbound by any like flaws of tradition and conventions and all of that actually tend to stifle innovation. I mean, look at the example. You had the honor. I had the honor of hosting you at the Warbirds Museum at the
Right.
spaceport, and as you mentioned, we had all these flying machines. But how were they invented? Who invented? Was it part of the industrial complex at the time? Were they the traditional manufacturers? No, it was
No, that's right.
the biggest, potentially the biggest invention ever in humanity has been to go off Earth, off planet, and the Wright brothers, bicycle people, thought of it because they weren't bound by the traditions of the establishment, the motor, the engine people that were doing it at the time. And so that's what building a community does. And that's what
Yeah.
you do in your cohorts, in your classes. Even in your new space finance organization, just look at the people making it up, coming from all different backgrounds, all walks of life. That's the key to unlocking innovation and success.
You put me in mind of a story. When I was at the National Ignition Facility, um, we fired the laser. So the National Ignition Facility is the biggest laser in the world, and it simulates a nuclear weapon going off or the inside of a star. It does a lot of different things, and it it yeah, it's built by Livermore, which jokingly stands for lasers, lasers, nothing but lasers, LLNL. It's, Livermore, Lawrence Livermore National Lab. And we blew up all the glass when we fired the laser the first couple times. It was like, oh my God, we've just spent half a trillion of taxpayer money, and we blew it up, literally. Took weeks to clean stuff up, and we realized we hadn't built the right glass. Uh, and so Ed Moses, the director of the National Ignition Facility, said, "We're going to take everything else down. We got to go off and research glass." And he started doing something that I'd never seen before as a young physicist, in my early 20s, callow youth and all that. Um, he, every design meeting we had, he would have a musician and a literal artist in the meeting. These were high level meetings, and I got to be, I walked in as an assistant to a very senior scientist, and I would sit in the back and keep my mouth shut primarily and take notes. But I got to see these meetings, and there was the director of the National Ignition Facility pointing at somebody who looked like a hippie off of Telegraph Avenue and saying, "What do you think?" And it was really a powerful moment for a 3-year-old to see that one, that level of inclusion, but also the idea that we think we're smart. PhD physicists, there are a couple Nobel laureates in the room at these meetings, and he's asking the hippie off of Telegraph because he valued the completely different, unfettered, free mind perspective that person brought to the problem. And it accelerated us. It made a huge, these people made huge contributions that are difficult to quantify, but are impossible to ignore. And so it just made me think. What you were talking about made me think of that. What I wonder is now, right? How do we apply that same type of thinking and integrative thinking to a lot of the problems that we're looking at, where we talk about things like dual use, right? We want it to be defense and non-defense. We want it to be capable of being relevant on Earth and then have a vision to orbit. Um, and we're going to find other dual uses as we go, I'm sure. How do you think about it? How do you guide the people you're mentoring? Because you're such an amazing mentor to so many of these entrepreneurs
And
and
handsome, don't
innovators.
forget handsome mentor.
Handsome mentor, handsome.
Yeah, of
Well,
course.
look. I'm all of I support all men with nice beards who are bald, because that's just it's the B&B club, right? But really, like how do we now think about this? Because it's a great point. Like we need these perspectives in the room, but now we're also being asked to not think about things for one purpose, but these multifaceted, larger purposes. How does that work together? How do you help guide people through thinking about these problems in those ways?
So we don't. I get people can know we didn't stage this because there's certain questions I would make sure no one ever asked. Uh, because I hate the word dual use. I don't think there's such a thing as dual use. What is the purpose of the what is use versus use? I call it true use. And
Mm,
true use is that means that they're the same because what you if you're doing a commercial, so I assume that the first use is means commercial and then the dual is government or defense or something. But the first use that's commercial should be helping to make your society safer, better, stronger, more sustainable, more educating and inspiring your children better, making sure that you have enough food, enough shelter, enough education, enough inspiration. And that's all part of being safe and secure, and just as much as having laser beams from the sky. So in my
Pew
mind,
pew.
all of them are the same use. It's all now if we're in there's very little, like when I was teaching homeland security right after 9/11, when I was deployed the Pentagon and the White House, and then I started to look at um, the stand-up Department of Homeland Security, which we still, by the way, don't have space as a critical infrastructure, which is one of my biggest parts of my moonshot initiative, is to get it where it belongs. It actually belongs above all of them,
Mm,
as just like you have communications and energy is
right.
cross cutting into all of them. But you want to be able you have to be doing something that progresses, even when you're doing a commercial activity that is helping your community. And if you're not, then you shouldn't even be doing it from a commercial standpoint, because we have so many problems. Like I said, nobody cares about your idea. Yeah, you should looking at problems, not your ideas. So we want to be able to focus on that, so that we can be able to come together as a community and really focus. So I don't believe in dual use; it's true use, and the only use is for helping to make your community safer, better, stronger, more secure, better educated, and that in itself is going to lead to the same thing that the defense and homeland security is looking to achieve. It's the same use.
Yeah, I know. It's a unity and a clarity. This is what a thing does. Now, however we apply it, that's those are we can discuss that. But at the heart of it, right? It does it have a capability to improve life on Earth for humans and others. Um, so as we think about that, then when you think about finding that application and thinking about technology, you touched on something that I thought was super powerful, is that not everything has to be an innovation in terms of I've created a new technology, I've created a new widget, I've discovered a fundamental property of a material, but a lot of it can be innovation in that business model, in that use case, in that application, or integrating all this technology that we have. And I think that's a really big point. I think, Bob Zubrin will rail for hours and hours on that, right? Saying we could have been on Mars in 1995 or something, right? Because we had the tech, we just chose we didn't make the choice to use it in this way. Um, I think a lot of that's changing now. People are starting to say, how do we pick up all these Legos? We've spent all this time building these exquisite, beautiful little Lego pieces, and we're not integrating them to do anything more interesting than within their own little thing separately. Um, how does that also affect? Do you see there being an international component to that? I mean, because I feel like
Yes, yes. So
there's so much to integrate.
it's two sides of the same coin. When we talked about their having to have a new innovation to be able to do something rather than just having a new business model or use case, or really I just call application. It's an application for the same thing. And I think it's hubris. I think it gets back to, we talk about this great need to create too many over specializations, because that way you can be the kingdom of your little fiefdom. That's if you said to someone, well,
Feudal.
yeah, if this discipline really is the subdiscipline of this, it really shouldn't exist, it really doesn't add anything to this other discipline, then you wouldn't have a journal to write, you wouldn't have an association to collect dues on, you wouldn't be the president and vice president of the association. It just comes down to not being collaborative enough. I think that the more you get collaborative, and not saying, oh, I have to invent the thing that's my own, that I can use other people's and work together and more collaboratively. And as you started off, the stronger our ecosystem can be, and more inclusive and more collaborative, then we start to get away from some of these super siloed problems where we have to just have everything has to be a new technology that we have to invent. It has to have our name on it. We have to have patent. It has to be a whole new company around it. And that's part of what we tell really very strongly, as you know. And one of the things that's extra complicated in large systems, but in space even more so because space is hard, is that your customer isn't necessarily going to be NASA, Space Force, or John Q. Public. It's going to be the people that already have those customers, right?
Right.
So if you can have one customer and sell to Walmart, for instance, instead of having to sell to the 60 million people that Walmart sells to, then you instead of one customer over 60, it's a lot easier, but people don't do that math. They see when they start out as being the end user, whether it be that astronaut landing on the ground or that mom and dad going into Target as being the customer and not realizing how complex and complicated, especially in space, that supply chain is that then requires that, then getting back to it, collaboration, communication, coordination in the ecosystem, as you mentioned when you started off.
So that brings us to a couple of other thoughts that I think it'll be great to hear from you on because I know you're working closely with the Space Force, for example, with
As we
NASA.
speak, right here
Well,
in
yeah,
your
I
lab,
mean,
in
literally,
Peterson, yeah.
you're sitting there with them. Um, this is hard for a lot of legacy organizations to get what you're talking about. Um, what has been effective in helping them understand it and helping them take advantage of the opportunities that this new way of thinking and provides? And where do you see there's still things to be done?
Well, there's a lot of work to be done. Um, I mean, the people that to try to get them to understand, you just have to look at the innovation wall of shame. You just look at Bell and Howell and Kodak and BF Hutton and Kenner Toys and Blockbuster, and people say, "Oh yeah, those are big companies. They didn't make it. They didn't innovate." No, no, it's actually worse than that. It's actually worse than that. Zenith, all those companies I mentioned, weren't just the Goliath at the time that in that sector, but they created that sector. Zenith created TVs. Bell and Howell created the 8 millimeter video film. Um, Kodak camera. So they created these, and yet they were unable to be collaborative enough to listen to the community, to open the tents, to work with everybody in the ecosystem to see beyond themselves. And so that's you say, how do I convince people? It's hard. And sometimes you just say you don't bother, you just look at the people that have success, focus on them, and eventually they'll see it. Um, because we get in these innovation bubbles, unfortunately, that really serve no purpose. It's all a really the solution, as you said at the very beginning, is about being inclusive, being everybody to the table, everybody from artists to astronomers, everybody from musicians to mathematicians, and everybody from rock stars to rocket scientists. Bring everybody together because there's a place in space for every face.
And then, that's super important. It's funny you mentioned that Kodak. I was up in Rochester, New York for a couple of years.
Which
And
used to be the Silicon Valley of the
yes,
world.
that's right. That's right. I
The
mean, and it's
Silicon
such an
Valley of
amazing
the world.
town, or used to be
It
such an
used to
amazing
be called
town.
Innovation Alley, just like it before that was Detroit.
Yeah. Corning
Yeah,
Corning's there, Bausch and Lomb. Like it's the optic center of America. The Optical Society of America is still based there. But it's been decimated. And I worked with somebody who was in the room when the statement was made by a VP at Kodak, digital is just a fad. We're a chemical company. How did that work out for them?
Yeah.
It's just amazing. And I've held because I worked at the Nevada test site, right? And the government was the first procurer of what we later called the CCD. It was initially called the Electron Bucket Brigade Detector. Because they
Wow.
thought of it as electron buckets, right? These charge wells, right? The charge cup, right? And I've held the damn device. It's in a museum in that's classified, at the test site, and it has a DOE on it, and it has a codec on it.
So
Right?
you
These
you
guys were there. They were there. They had everything, and
yeah,
they
yeah,
and they ran away from it actually because they didn't
yeah.
understand. And their perspective was, as you
Well,
said, right, is that backlooking perspective. We're a chemical company,
right.
not
So
a
again,
imaging company.
right. So you're and you could go even further up the value chain
Right.
and say, no, they're in a preserving memories. They're in a
Yeah. Yeah.
creating records, capturing moments company. And we this brings us full circle very nicely. Z, you just master, of talking about following the problem, not the solution. So if they say, well, we have the solution, pardon the pun, to the chemical company, um, where
That was good.
we have a solution. We have to find everywhere we can. Because we're a chemical company, just like saying, we're a transistor company, or we're a film rental company. We're not an entertainment company. Um, then you lose sight of the opportunities for your success and to serve your customers, serve those needs. And if you don't take care of your customers, somebody will,
Right.
which is what happened because they just like you said, they had the hammer. So every solution, every problem was a nail. But this is again, if they had framed themselves quite simply to say, we are in the business of preserving memories, however those may be, we're going to find the best way to do that instead of starting off with their idea and their dream that they have to follow, that, it's all about the chemicals and how they can push the chemicals. That's what we really have to frame the discussion in every area of innovation. Now, we're very lucky in space for space innovation because there's so many problems that are just fighting to be solved. So you don't have to guess. And that's one of people say, oh, it's really hard to do business with the government. It's actually nothing could be further from the truth. What commercial customer tells you in excruciating
What they
detail
want.
exactly what they want,
Yeah.
exactly how much they're going to pay for it, when they're going to pay for it, what the budget
Yeah. And
is,
their cash always
who's
checks, or a
yeah,
check always cashes.
they're
Sorry,
always
my
good for
my
the money.
dyslexia.
Yeah. And even the name of the person that's responsible for it. Like, show me any commercial company that is going to be so generous. And by the way, if you don't have a product yet to sell them, oh, that's okay. No problem. We'll give you some money to work on your product to be able to do that. Oh, and by the way, if it doesn't work out, that's okay. No problem. That's helpful to us to know that that's the path we shouldn't go down in the future. That's okay. No problem. You can keep the money. Oh, but if it works, oh, then you can sell it back to us and make a profit off of it. You don't have to, we don't own in many cases, don't own any part of that. Oh, and by the way, not only do we allow you to sell that to dual use, to commercial, we want you to,
Right.
we beg you to do that. That's a measure of our success because that spreads the love and spreads the risk and allows you to be a more secure and stable company so then you can serve our needs in the government better and we're not bearing the entire cost of the support of your product. So everybody saying, oh no, you have to do commercial because it's better. Really, I know people that have been chasing around, big finance, big oil, big companies for years doing the
Yeah.
dance.
Yeah.
And then they
It's
give them
brutal.
something they have to give to them without cost, like for a period of time for them to try it so they can reverse engineer it and build it themselves. And it becomes a feature in their entire existing product line and they have time for you. So all the conventional wisdom is pretty unconventional. So it's
Well,
cool.
and
But
and that's really I love that you're now bringing us to the capital side because I think we need to talk about that as well, right? Ecosystems need fuel, and the government. is great and historically has been amazing. If you look at pretty much almost every life change, society changing technological bit of progress in the last roughly 100 years, it's been funded somehow at some level by governments, whether the American one or the British one or the German one. Some of that was not so friendly, obviously, and others around the world. But the bottom line is, right, governments invest with the concept that they're doing it in their national interest, right? And this brings us me to kind of, we're doing this workshop um, at 9 o'clock on June 3rd at the convention center, parallel to the rest of the Space Tech Expo tracks, on investing in the space economy and why that is really the way, a major way forward, a spectacular class for investors to be looking at. We really are hoping that we get, every investor that's at all interested, even if they've just heard a rumor. We want them to come to this, session so that they can understand how they can think about this. But we also want entrepreneurs to show up because we're going to touch on how to raise capital, where the capital resides, and how to communicate with that community. Because that's one of the things that, of course, founders are the worst at, right? Innovators bias is a real thing. Everybody loves their shiny baby. I love my widget. Nobody wants to hear about your widget. As you said, they want to hear about the problem you're solving and how that problem is going to be solved. And if the widget happens to be part of it, that's great. But what they're buying, what they're investing in, is how to solve a problem. And I think the point you made really eloquently, and I just want to really like put a hard edge on it, is that there's no other class besides space and defense that is so heavily underwritten by the government. No other sector in our economy gets this level of de-risking of the business cases by the government as anything else, right? If you talk about a dog food startup, the government is not putting non-dilutive capital next to investors in dog food companies, right? Diapers.com, some dude started that out of his garage, right? But if you were talking about Black Star Orbital or Nagar's company, right, or any of these other amazing companies that we work with, right, the government's there and saying, hey, look, we're going to put in half of the money to get them from 0 to 1. Investment community, capital markets, you only need to put in half. We are going to de-risk it to that level. And so it's funny when
And
I
then they
hear,
become a customer, not just
and
they
then
build
and
it,
then
but
they're
then
going
they
to
become
become
a
a customer.
customer.
We're going to invest in you, and we're going to guarantee you a run rate business once you build this out. So it's just amazing to me when I hear people talk about how, well, space is weird. I'm afraid to invest in it. I'm not sure. It's highly risky, right? It's rockets is really risky. And I just feel like saying to them, I'm like, no, 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 no. The goofy app that you invested in last week is the risky thing, not where the government is saying, we have these goals to meet and we're going to invest in these 10 technologies. So show up if you have something.
Right.
That's not,
Because those
it's
problems,
literally
because
not rocket science.
right, right. Because again, yes, exact. Because again, it gets back to the problems. Like, yes, your dog may or may not need to be walked. Like if there's people decide to stay home and don't go to work as much and telecommute, they don't need dog walking apps. So that's not maybe a success, but we need to strengthen our PNT to have reliable GPS. We know that we need reliable navigation timing systems. We know that we need to be able to clear up the orbital debris. We
That's right.
know that we need to find alternative space-based energy sources. We know that we need to have improved monitoring of our Earth so we can use the resources on Earth better. We know that we need to improve our transportation systems and that space having the literal high ground and the bird's eye view is the best way to do that. We know those are pretty all much sureties. So if you look at a long-term investment in space-related applications versus things that we aren't really going to show we're going to ever need or know, yes, as you say, the choice is clear.
Yeah. It's an underinvested class from the capital markets and an overinvested class from the government writing down risk. To me, that's a no-brainer for security of investment. And so we're going to be covering that in detail. There's also going to be a great panel afterwards, where Space Force and NASA are going to be in the room. Robert's going to be leading that
A
along with a.
historic
That's
gathering of
true.
NASA, I must
No,
say, and
please,
Space
please,
Force
please.
together. Yes. So, um, with the help of my amazing partners at NASA Langley, and a big shout out to Dr. Rami Rahimi, formerly of Embry-Riddle. He partnered with me and the organizers of Space Tech Expo USA, and we're bringing not one, not two, not three, but six NASA centers or five in headquarters all together in one place at the same time for one town hall, along with members of the amazing U.S. Space Force, both from Vandenberg and from here at Cape
Coast to
Canaveral,
coast.
all together, working together, rolling up their sleeves together, and being able to interact and outreach to the amazing community of investors, industry partners, and of course, entrepreneurs there in one room all at the same time.
Yeah,
So we
it's gonna
invite
be
everybody to
it's
be
gonna be
there. Yeah.
very special, and it's gonna be a huge opportunity because people don't people. I mean, people. I don't know when it's last happened. Like you said, it's historic because I've been doing this for a long time, and you never get all the centers and headquarters except for meetings in DC, which the public doesn't get to go to. This is an opportunity for people to show up and actually engage and interact, learn what they need to do to work with those organizations.
Right.
Uh,
Right. Because they're all very, very different.
yeah, they're very different, but then also the opportunity to understand what's horizontal and how you could serve them all possibly. You know, so we please join us the third and the fourth Space Tech Expo. Hit win.ngo for the list of events. It's going to be a very special 2 days. Like I said, I'm leading along with Robert and a couple of colleagues the space investing discussion. And then we're going to have this panel later, and there's just it's going to be popping off. So it's going to be a lot of fun. We have 10 minutes left. I want to give folks an opportunity to ask a couple questions. So now you're very welcome. If you choose, you can drop it into the chat, or if you want to come on screen, unmute, turn your video on. We'd love to see you. And there have been a bunch of questions for Robert. Beatriz just dropped one in. I'd love to hear Robert's perspective on workforce development for the space ecosystem, particularly considering how important innovation and collaboration are in the system.
Oh, is that for me?
Yeah, that's
Okay.
for you. Basically, how do you approach workforce dev? I
So
think is the
I
question.
that was he told me to talk about entrepreneurship and investment, or else I would be talking about education, because that to me is the number one most important thing. That's the prerequisite for everything we're talking about. When we look at having diversity on our panel, we certainly want diversity. We really, really want diversity. And it's too late. Like it's too late. Not when we start looking, it's too late because we're 12 years too late. In some cases, we're 20 years too late because you have to start cultivating the the people in this our space world almost before they're born. And part of it is we have to stop looking at space as a sector, as a specific sector. It's really all the sectors. Anything you can do in space. If you like if you like plants, we want to grow plants in habitats in orbit on the moon. If you like psychiatry and psychology, well, they the most fundamental thing about a spaceship when they first designed Apollo is how many people are going to be there inside, and that was based on the analysis of human performance and how people interacted in groups. So all these disciplines, we have to get away from. I love STEM, obviously I do because I have 4 degrees: physics, math, computer science, and I'm a minor in chemistry um, and systems engineering. So I love STEM, but we have to say that it's way beyond STEM. And we want to encourage people to not give up on STEM, especially young women and girls that start out doing amazingly well, and then we don't there's not enough follow through. We need to keep being able to support them with the proper amount of inspiration. But it's everybody, whether you're, as we said, whether you're interested in art or music or literature, space. We're just so lucky. Everybody in this call is so lucky because we are in a unique area, a unique super sector, I'll call it, that is so inspirational, that pulls people into it. And they just don't know where to start. They don't know if it's for them. We need to get the message out that it's for everybody. As it's for everybody, regardless of your interests. We need you. We need your innovative way of thinking. We need because it's not about your knowledge, it's about how we aggregate your knowledge as part of, again, as he said when he kicked off this, the ecosystem and the community that we're building. So it's getting the message early, and I am very honored and pleased that most of the time when I'm not here at Space Force, I am at one of the universities or schools in the area, promoting space as an opportunity for everybody. And indeed, we're going to have one of the entrepreneurs on stage at Space Tank was one of the students that I outreached and invited through the university to come and attend last year. And I reached out to Ed Riddle and all the universities in the area and across the country, them in particular, because they have a number of campuses locally, and invited them and all their students. And he came, and this year he's on stage. So it's really about getting the message out early and often that space is for everybody.
So we have just a little bit of time left. Are you okay if we do a couple rapid fire questions, quick answers? Um,
The lightning round, which the space
Lightning
hates
round,
lightning,
baby.
but
Lightning round.
you can't say lightning. It's like saying it's booming business. We can't, some words we can't say in space, but
I think that joke might just crash, you know. Yeah, but come on, let's light it up here real fast. What would you say is the biggest non-defense problem we could to be solved leveraging space?
the biggest
Yeah,
non-defense
or
problem.
or the one you feel most passionate about, perhaps.
Oh, there's so many. There's a lot of medical problems that we saw. I think sustainability. I think
Yeah,
sustainability. Um, when you're off planet, you have no choice. Your resources are so limited. You're forced to, and of course, necessity is the mother of invention. We're so blessed to have such abundant resources on Earth that we tend to not use those resources frugally. But when you're in
yeah,
space, you're forced out of necessity to use them frugally and to be the ultra or super sustainability, I call it. So the super space sustainability, once we conquer it on space, as you saw in The Martian, for instance, which I don't know if we go that extreme, but that we can use on Earth to be able to help us. Everything we do off Earth helps us on Earth
on
be
Earth,
that much
right.
better. So I think being able to be more sustainable in our use of resources, whether it's for food or for whatever we do on Earth, that's one of the biggest.
Awesome. Next speed round. Um, with there being restrictions for ITAR, EAR, Wolf Amendment, how can we both what is perhaps one thing we can do that can make us and our ecosystems more international while still working within the reality of the regimes that exist?
So that's a complex one.
Yeah,
And
yeah. Hard for
so
speed round, I
they
know.
are working to specifically reduce the ITAR
Right.
in some areas. There are some amazing initiatives at the State Department. I encourage everybody to check out the I2U2 initiative, which is the I's are India, Israel, and then the U's are UAE and the United States. But there are many others. I think that by working together and understanding each other, we break down some of those barriers, but also in some of these regulations are people deploy them or call them out somewhat out of laziness or complacency. like ITAR just means that you can't export a technology out of the United States. It doesn't necessarily mean that that somebody who's not a U.S. citizen, U.S. national, can't come in and help you
Right,
with that.
right,
It just
right,
can't be a path out. But people go, "Oh, ITAR, can't work with them. I can't touch that company. I can't do anything with them because of ITAR." I mean, I am actively proud to be helping the U.S. Space Force through AFRL and through SpaceWorks, not just allow, but go out and scout and seek and bring to the table amazing international companies from our amazing partners in India and Israel and Japan. And we need those solutions. I think that the by having them grow on their own in their country and then it being a product, like they're selling a product, like they're not
right, right.
necessarily having to come in and I'm really against the model that you have and the regulations are shifting to be more flexible. Yes, in SBAR is 50%, all of that. But if you have an amazing product that there is nothing like it in the US, you can prove that you have clean supply chains, which is a challenge even for US companies to be able to prove. So,
Oh,
but if you
it's
can prove you
it's
have,
like proving a negative. It's almost
yeah,
impossible.
yeah, if you can prove you have, then they're going to say yes. Like, don't whine, don't complain, make your product so amazing that it's an offer that they can't refuse, that the need is so great. If the need isn't so great that they say, we'll make it happen, then you then pick a serious enough problem. The problem you need to pick a problem that regulations aren't going to be a barrier, that
Yeah,
money isn't going to be a barrier.
yeah,
There are
yeah.
so many hard
Or they'll
problems
move
for you
those
to solve.
things because the
Right,
problem is so big that, hey,
right,
the problem's bigger than this petty nonsense that we
correct,
got going.
correct. So you need to pick a bigger, harder problem.
That I love that. Pick a bigger, harder problem. Folks, we are at the hour. I want to be respectful of everyone's time, particularly Robert's,
Oh, I thought the five
before
minutes goes both ways. That means also we can go over 5 minutes too.
we
No.
can. We definitely can. But I do want to give you I want to give you the last word. This has been an amazing discussion. Please hit win.ngo. The entire itinerary is there for the third and the fourth. Amazing events at Space Tech Expo, registered Space Tech Expo, of course, for access to all of it. But Robert, if you had one thing you would leave this audience with, it's very diverse. You've seen a bunch of the discussion in the chat. Great questions. What would you say? Don't forget this as you move forward in your journey in through space of all types of space.
So I already said that there's a place in space for every face, meaning everybody has a place at the table. And I already essentially inferred that there's a place in space for your sector's base, meaning it's
Right.
truly interdisciplinary. I really have to just conclude in thinking, I think something that's overarching that in addition to chase the clients, not the cash, is think bigger. Think of big problems. You have so little precious time to be able to spend in making that impact. You want to make as big of an impact as possible. And you need to be able to come together, communicate, collaborate, coordinate, and work together in building this ecosystem so we can solve those big problems and so we can think bigger.
Love it. Well, thank you, sir. This has been spectacular. Once again, we'll in just a couple of weeks, we'll be hearing from. Well, I don't want to give it away, but we've got two folks, one very interesting startup, and another veteran investor they might be on together. So that we should that'll be great. But in the meantime, don't miss Robert, myself, my colleague Doug Owens from Space Outcomes. Six NASA centers,
Yes.
the Space Force.
Rami
This is going
Rahimi
to
from
be
Langley was putting
Dr.
all together.
Rahimi.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to be special. So please join us in Long Beach, third and the fourth. You can, of course, study silicon interactions with H2O, afterwards. But it's going to be fun, down there at the beach, and we're going to really, hopefully, continue to drive the ignition around that Robert is doing around the country. He's around there lighting little fires, and pretty soon they're
Bonfires, big
roaring.
bonfires.
They're roaring very quickly. Thank you
Thank you so
again.
much.
Everyone, take care, and hopefully see you in Long Beach next week.
Good to see everybody. Thank you so much. Take care.
Thanks,
Bye bye.
Robert.
Cheers, guys.
Thank you so much. Hey, Michael, good to see you.